welcome to another special edition of Talking Books Africa, brought to you by the Rainbow Book Club, project managers of Port Harcourt UNESCO World Book Capital 2014. Now, today's episode is going to be a little different. We usually have an author on here to speak about one of their books. But for today's guest, it would be impossible to limit the conversation to just one of his works. So instead, we are going to be speaking about a biography of his written by the Rainbow Book Club's founder, Koko Kalango, for his 90th birthday last year. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the first person of African descent to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, Professor Wole Soyinka. Thank you for joining us, sir.
A pleasure.
Of course, you're no stranger to the Rainbow Book Club, and this is not your first interview with us.
Oh.
But for the benefit of the audience, I will say that it's the first time you're being interviewed by me instead of my mom, who is also the author of this book. So, sir, to start us off, I'm going to be a bit cheeky and reference an interview that you had with CNN African Voices last year, in which you said that you were going to swear you were not going to do any more interviews for the rest of your life. So I have to ask, what made you decide to do this one?
Well, multiple answers to that. First of all, I was getting a little bit, exhausted by having even what I have said being misinterpreted, being taken out of context. In spite of the fact that there are things that said before, and at least in my view, the meaning, the purpose should be clear. And it's amazing how, especially these days with social media, which has become, for me personally, more problematic than being a positive contribution, which we all expected it to be, and which has been used positively, of course, by certain other societies. But finally, it was, there comes a time where you feel you are overexposed. Nobody complains about it, nobody talks to you about it, but you just feel inside, look, here we go again, I'm being overexposed. It's a very serious, deep feeling. And sort of in the middle of an interview, same subjects, different approaches to the same subject, variations on the same subject, or a repetition, just feel. So that was a very serious and meant declaration. But of course, people like you then come along, and you make me feel obliged to oblige.
Well, we're very grateful that you obliged us. I'll try to make this as comfortable and not as overexposing.
Okay.
For your benefit, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we're here to talk about this book, which is about your life, but not written by you, unlike some of your other works. How does it feel to read about your life and your story through the lens of someone else?
Well, remember, in the arts, I've been a student of literature, of history, of philosophy, of sociology, the study of human beings. And I say that, remind you about that, because I believe it's possible for me to be objective about myself.
Okay.
And so when you ask a question, as does it feel like this, I can tell you that there are moments that I give different answers at different phases. What's been happening lately, in other words, subjectively. I've come to the conclusion that, did you ever watch some of these science fiction films, people dropping from a different planet?
Yes.
I think I'm one of them.
How so? Please elaborate.
Take, for instance, a few years ago, I was going through my archives as an institution which wanted to acquire the archives like they do, writers, artists, and so on. And I was continually astonished. I kept saying, oh, wait a minute, did I really do that? Wait a minute, was I in that place how could I have been in that place and that place at the same time? Because it looked that way going through the pages. And how is it that I took a certain form of action at a certain time? In other words, if you go, I'm sure that to a large extent, this also happens to other people.
Yeah.
But in my own case, I think it's a little bit excessive. That I find it even sometimes difficult to believe certain things I've done, certain things I've been through, and sometimes how come I'm still alive? Those questions become asked. That's why I say maybe I came from one of these planets where, it's only a kind of mineral in that planet which can send me to sleep or knock me out or whatever. I exaggerate a little, but I'm telling you, there's an element of that feeling in me sometimes.
Well, if you have that feeling, then I would understand why you say you can be objective about yourself. There's a bit of distance. You can't even remember if you really did something. So, sir, I'll ask your objective opinion.
Good, thank you.
What you thought about this book, whether it, captured the key points of your life, whether you would have included anything or excluded anything from it?
When I read that book, and I hardly ever go over what I've written and published. Once it's out in the air, for me, that's a child who's been sent out in the world. But this one, of course, the mom, she kept insisting I should at least try and read it, and I eventually read it. And of course, it doesn't say everything about my childhood, but it said enough for me for it to trigger certain other things in my childhood which are not in there. And all I can say, it's a wonder I wasn't beaten to death as a child. That's all I can say about that. Say, wait a minute. Yes, after this episode, or before this episode, I got into this. Oh dear. And I took that attitude too, and I asked certain questions which embarrassed the adult people, They found offensive, maybe, and then they looked again. And I had even contradictory names in childhood. I remember that. Thank goodness you weren't aware of some of those names. And many of them contradictory, but truthful, from the point of view of the people I was relating to. The words precocious, very common. I was at the same time, some considered. Can you imagine, in childhood, one of my, in fact, I think stepmothers gave me the name Okorijeje.
Which means?
It means gentle being. And I've tried to reconcile that kind of nickname with the life I have led, even as a child. And others will say, Now, reconcile Okorijeje with Onijogmo mean troublemaker.
Okay.
There's a clear contradiction there. And yet, it was addressed truthfully from different points of view. So that's why I say it's a marvel that I haven't survived up till now.
But sir, you do have a gentle side to you. I feel I can see that here, sitting with you. And even in the book, one of your friends mentioned that although you might sometimes appear stoic outside, you have a very soft heart. Would you agree?
Well, I'll leave you to decide.
So you've spoken about some of the things that you got up to as a child, and you had a very colorful, eventful childhood. Interestingly enough, I don't believe you've ever written anything for children, though.
I have made attempts.
Okay.
My publisher, in fact, was very insistent. He kept, in fact, more than one publisher said, you really, with your imagination and with your capability of entering into people's minds, you should be able to write a book. And of course, it was in the interest of the publisher to get that book out of me. Children's books, I understand, at least school books. And he will give example of Professor this, who wrote a school text, and he said, look at the royalties you're making every year. Go and look at that. He wrote one children's book, and he's been living on it ever since. So try and make just one book, and then you can go back and write whatever else you want to write. And and for me it made sense. I mean, first of all, I know that I enjoyed reading as a child, so why shouldn't I be able to, use that now to be productive in this? So both from the economic point of view, and also the sense of wanting to sharing, the scope and the wildness sometimes of my imagination, I did want to write a children's book. Now, for me, I cannot bear to talk down to children. I must speak to them, of course, in a language that they understand, about things that's not beyond their kind. But I believe that one should not talk down to children. Certainly, as a child, I resented it. It's one of the problems I had. Don't talk to me. Don't talk down to me, because I know I have a world inside of my own. And so I wanted to enter the mind of a child, or more accurately, to re-enter, especially, the world has developed, community has evolved, different phenomena from those of my childhood have taken place, become the norm. And so it's always necessary to make sure that I'm also in a child's world. That was very difficult to re-enter. The consequence, however, was not too negative, because that effort resulted in my saying, okay, let me try and recollect my own childhood and re-enter it, which is how Ake came about, really. Okay. I didn't want to write about my childhood at all. In fact, I wanted to capture the period, the environment of my childhood through the biography of an uncle, okay, whom I admired a lot, the father of the Afrobeat king, Fela. And this was the Reverend I. Ransom Kuti, a colorful, impossible character. Whom I used to look at, in wonder, how can a whole principal of a university, of a secondary school, and with a record of being a labor, he was, I think, the first Secretary General of the Nigerian Union of Teachers before independence. He was a musician, and he was an educationist. I admired him a lot. So I decided, okay, let me try and capture that period of my childhood through the way I saw him. And we actually spoke. I said, I am writing your biography. And he traveled out, came back. We actually agreed, that I'll come and sit with him and we'll talk. And then what happened? He died on me. So I dropped that project. Then I can't remember what happened, in which it was like a flash. I re-entered that period completely, and I was able to begin writing Ake. And because I wanted to write it from a child's point of view, with very little intervention from the adult, viewpoint. And for some time, it's interesting you should ask this question. It's quite a remarkable story. I began it, and I wrote the first couple of chapters. And then I don't know what happened. I think I was sucked into some adult problems which preoccupied me. Tried to get back into it. I failed. So I dropped it. I dropped it completely and went on to do other things. Then I ran into political trouble, and I was detained. I was in detention for quite a while. And during that period, during that isolation, I found I was able to re-enter that period, to recollect it in great detail. I had a series of flashbacks, actually. I have a photographic memory, I should mention that. I actually was able to pursue it. So I began secretly, because I was not allowed writing paper, and it's another story. So I began. Now, here's where writing, literature, recapture, all these come in. So I wrote I began all over again. I didn't have what I'd written before.
Wow.
So I began all over again, recapturing that period the way I'd recaptured it earlier. So I wrote it, I would write, hide the papers and so on, left everything. I think about a year or two after I came out of prison, one day it all came back again. And I went back to, this time of course I had possession of my secret writings, so I had those chapters. And when I went back to what I'd written before, 3 chapters which I'd written before, and which I now wrote in prison, almost word for word, identical
Wow.
to what I'd written earlier. That's the story about it. And from that, I was able now to finish the work. I don't think all the way through it was the recapture. I think there were, of course, adult interventions now. I never did recapture the way I did before. But 3 chapters, almost word for word. And that's years span between one and the other.
I mean, that's fascinating. And of course, we do know that you wrote a lot whilst you were in prison, but I think looking on the outside in, you wouldn't expect that you would have this whole journey of twists and turns and trying to write this, and then it turned into this. You sort of assume, I mean, you've been writing for most of your life, so, just think, it came maybe naturally, I would say, or came in a straight line. But the background, like you said, just makes it all the more fascinating.
Yeah, even I found it, I couldn't believe it, the similarities. I mean, literally almost word for word.
Do you still have a photographic memory, even now?
Yes, I capture things from my childhood, from my youth, school, everything, almost in great detail.
Okay, so...
But at the same time, as age approaches, memory, even of immediate or anything, begins to slip. So don't give me any test now.
Sir.
I will fail.
I won't. Okay, so we'll go a bit into the past that you've discussed. You have been the first in many areas, most notably, like we had said earlier, the first person of African descent to be awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, but you were also the proponent of the first road safety corps in Africa. You were the first African writer to have your play running at the Royal Court Theatre in London, and so on. You've had a lot of firsts. So I wanted to sort of flip and go to the other extreme and ask you, Prof, that if you had to pick one thing in which you would be, shall I say, the last person to do that thing, to go through that thing, what do you think you would pick?
Well, a slight correction, because you use the word African descent. And before my play was done at the Royal Court Theatre, it was a play by a West Indian, black West Indian, Lloyd Record.
Okay.
So
the first African.
Yeah. So remember the title, You in Your Small Corner, was the title. So it was, he'd had his play at the Royal Court before me.
That's that photographic memory.
What would I be the last? That's a very difficult question. How long did it take you to think up something to floor me, with? Last thing. Shall we come back to this question?
Of course.
That's a very serious question.
Okay.
There's so many dimensions to it.
Okay.
All right.
So I guess I thought of it because I had a thought reading through this book. There was a part early on, I think in the second chapter, where we got a bit into, would I say, bullying, some of which you experienced maybe as a young child, early teens. And there's a part of the story, actually, let me read from it, where you were about to go into secondary school, I believe, and your grandfather was worried about older boys, bullying you or the likes, and so he took you through this ritual to make you stronger. And at the end, it says, or this book says, that he also told Wole never to run away from a fight, even if his opponent was bigger than him. So I have 2 questions based on this little segment of your life. The first is, if you have recollections of that experience, now that you're a grandfather yourself, what would your advice be to your grandchildren or just to younger kids who are maybe being treated not so nicely by their peers?
Not just grandfather, please don't diminish my title. I'm great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right. So what advice would I give to my children? Be yourself. Just follow your instincts. Yes, that would be what I said. Follow your instincts, and be yourself.
I like that.
Yeah.
So then, Prof, my second question is, the advice that your grandfather gave you, how do you feel it sort of affected your approach to challenges throughout your life, if it did at all?
Well, how has it affected? The first answer I will give is that I loved that advice. I felt it suited my temperament. So I was very happy, with it, that somebody as old and as wise as my grandfather had affirmed in me something which instinctively, an advice which I was already following, getting nicely beaten up, by bullies here and there, because I refused to back down many issues. So it is for me a vindication. Now, is it an advice I would give my child, my grandchild, my great-grandchild? No. Having looked at the world, having gone through so many things, I would say, if you have to get in a fight, make sure you have the deadlier weapon. Yeah, make sure you have the deadlier weapon.
It makes sense that you would say this now after all the fights you've been in throughout your life.
Yeah, make sure you have the deadlier. Because many people don't believe in a fair fight. They don't pick their own size. They use very dirty weapons. They have no. You encounter so many people who have no sense of honor, and so they're fighting with weapons which you are not capable of, which ethically are repulsive to you, and which you cannot therefore imitate. You feel you are diminished if you use your own kind of weapon. And so when I say make sure you have a deadlier weapon, I mean make sure you can outsmart them. In other words,
but not
use
stoop to their
weapons
level.
use a kind of weapon which they do not expect, and which will be more effective than their own. So it's a very complicated word. It has many, many nuances.
I appreciate that advice. And whilst we're giving advice to young people, I have another question. A lot of young people today, Prof, are very fascinated, or would I say obsessed, consumed with mentoring and having mentors and all of that. So during your life, would you say that you have had mentors, whether formal or informal?
Yes, I have had mentors. My grandfather, for me, I consider him a mentor. My father, in a very different way, was a mentor.
Okay.
There are several aspects of him that I admired enormously. And I used to marvel at, say, how is he capable of doing this? He was a disciplinarian. I believe in self-discipline. Anyways, I think one should always discipline oneself first to be able to discipline other people. And then I've had mentors like, I remember one who's incidentally, actually mentioned him in the book. And I recall one letter which he wrote me when I just entered government college. I wrote him, and he was sort of impressed by the expression in there. And he said, I hope you develop your descriptive bent. I remember that expression because it's the first time I encountered the word bent, which is inclination, of course. Bent looked very peculiar to me. Don't like to bend, They looked it up and I understood what it meant. And I valued it very much. And obviously, it should. Already, again, I had an instinct towards telling and retelling other people's stories, so that was there. But basically, informal mentors, for instance, one obvious person for me would be, I couple them very often, Mandela and Desmond Tutu.
Okay.
One, because of his courage and his resilience, his conviction, his powerful sense of conviction. Tutu, in a way, I considered him a mentor. I used to call him one of my favorite uncles. Because we used to argue a lot.
Okay.
We used to argue a lot because I didn't agree with everything that he said. But I used to marvel at his capacity to not just to preach forgiveness, but when he spoke to you, you meant inside that he actually practiced what he preached. And he was capable, he had enormous capacity to genuinely, authentically forget. I used to tell him, listen, the size of your halo in your head is too big for me. Leave me alone. I said, carry on with your own halo. I had lots. The two come together for the simple reason that I had quite some sessions with them individually, but also
together.
Reflexively. We'd have dinner and met in Paris and South Africa, and so we'd argue. Mandela didn't have, for instance, I used to contrast them. He didn't have even though politically and objectively he was ready, and he did say, let us forget the past. But his quality of forgetting was very different from Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu was a real saint. And I used to tell him the world would be much better. I know that objectively, if we were all like you. But you have to excuse me. I not only am I not like you, I don't want to be like you.
And you still feel that way?
But I was aware of it. And any opportunity, I try in that department to be, and I've succeeded with some people, but not as deeply as he. And I wish, really, genuinely, that we could all be like him in that respect. Some mentors that way, and of course, academic mentors, obviously, that's what we go to college for. Schools, Mr. Olagbaju, I consider was my first teacher, and he was the one who said, okay, all right, sit down, take your place, even though I was not old enough to be in school.
When you were 3 and you followed your sister. Yeah.
It is even, they told me, both my parents, after the book was written, and Mr. Olagbaju was alive at the time, and he was interviewed by some of the, he said, no, you were not quite 3. And he told me exactly, it was 2 months and about 2 years and about 3 months or sort of 3 years at the time.
So you weren't even 3, wow.
I wasn't even 3 at the time.
I feel like that should be another first, but I'm sure someone has done it at an earlier age. So you mentioned your dad as one of your mentors, and then you mentioned Nelson Mandela, you mentioned the halo, so I have a question forming. I'd like to take us back to December 10th, when you were being awarded the Nobel Prize. So you were in Sweden, in Stockholm, to receive it. And by this point, both of your parents had passed on. So I'm curious to know if you've ever wondered, just imagining them in heaven looking down on you, receiving that award, what do you think they would have said?
Well, the direction to answer that was that is one of the things I regretted, that they were not around. I just imagined the two of them sitting there, my mother especially. My father would just absorb it like, good, but so what? Let's go and have some dinner. My mother, I was trying to picture. She would have been insufferable. And I would have teased the hell out of her. I would say, yes, at one time, as I wrote about that, she told me that I had a me issue. That's when I nearly beat my junior brother to death, because he intervened with my admiration, my girlfriend, the one I was going to marry when I grew up. And I would say, you see, to have a bit of a mere issue, it's not bad, is it? And you know what she'll do? She'll hit me. So I missed her, not being there very much. And I tell you, talking about looking down, since I find it very difficult to picture that, I'll give you the nearest to that event. This was in London, at Westminster Cathedral. It was a celebration of one of these periods of human rights. And I delivered one of the speeches. And I delivered it from the pulpit. And as I was climbing the pulpit into the lectern which was placed there, said, I bet my mother, she was very fond of entertaining people, tea. She always had a teapot. Any occasion, anything, if you're passing by, she'll call you, we'll like some tea. That was my mother. I said, she'll be out there in the street with her teapot and cups and serving tea and celebrating that this Emirshu son was actually climbing a Christian pulpit to deliver a speech. I nearly missed my lines through imagining it when I was talking, because the image was so strong. She's looking down. They say, I always said it, the power of prayer. She believed very much in that. And of course, I diverged ages ago, renounced Christianity, renounced all that thing. And she said, I did it. That's him in the pulpit.
Somehow, her prayer.
Somehow, a prayer worked. I was in the pulpit delivering a sermon.
Wow. Do you remember, you said you were speaking about human rights. Do you remember what the topic was in any more detail?
Well, there's so many dimensions. I've given so many speeches on human rights. I cannot remember this one, but it was caustic. Before that, because I said that would be a unique, and this is related to your question. What's the thing you would like to be seen doing as a last event? So that's one. Yes, that's the answer to your question.
Giving human rights speeches? Or is it giving a speech on human rights that you would like to be the last of? Because
No. I'll tell you what. Because I knew in advance. For me, the human rights thing, I would do anything for human rights, even associating on that level with the Christian religion, which I had renounced ages ago. So I stationed a friend of mine, a photographer. Normally, I don't photograph my events, other people do. But this one, I said, Jerry, I have something to do at the Cathedral Church in London. I want you to make sure you get good photographs of me there. So I went down. And there he was. I saw him, with his camera and so on, so I was able to ignore him. And so afterwards, I saw him. And, yes, I want to see these pictures. I want to send it to all my friends, because that's the last time they will ever see me climbing with him. That character, I nearly clobbered him with my beer bottle. He did not take one photograph.
What was he doing?
I said, but I saw you there, and I saw you pointing. He said, well, since it was a spiritual place, he felt it would be wrong for him to take a picture of me in the pulpit. I didn't speak for him for weeks afterwards. He said, I asked you, this thing, there's no way you will get another picture of me climbing a pulpit into it. And you didn't. And it was also so absurd because, photographers are very intrusive.
Yes, they are.
I say I'm not a Christian, I'm not this, I'm not a Muslim, and so on. I have my own spiritual domain. And I always feel very resentful when camera people intrude in the altar space, in other people's sacred space. I always say, respect their sacred space. They think they can intrude their cameras. So there is I always protect, directly or indirectly, sacred spaces. And all I said was, you can stand at the other end of this huge cathedral and point your lens at me and get me a picture of the last time. And you failed me. So I don't have a photo to show you.
So you can get a photo this time.
Yeah.
Maybe you do it again so you can get a photo this time.
No way. I want to leave people in their own, space, and they should also learn to leave me in my space, my spiritual space.
So my mind went to another human rights speech I would say you gave. This was back in 2020 during the End SARS movement in Nigeria, and you spoke to a group of youth who were obviously leading it. And you said that they had brought fresh blood into old veins. I'm making sure I quoted you correctly. I believe I did. That was 5 years ago. Do you still feel that way about the youth of Nigeria?
No, I feel that way till today about End SARS movement.
Okay.
Because I was in there, as you know, I moved around, watched them, their dedication, their conviction, even their strategy, their planning, the order, the organization. Everything was really. It's another story how they were sort of scattered to the four winds, and I contrast that movement, that effort. I contrast it with the debasement by the same generation of instruments of communication like social media, and it's appalling. And it's difficult to believe that it's that same generation that produced this marvelous uprising, meaningful and absolutely justified in every sense, that go on internet, tell the most hideous lies, use the most filthy language, who believe that they are there, just to literally vomit on society. Those who have turned, I always use this expression, the social media, which gave birth to the famous Arab Spring, whose effects, whose lessons in democracy, in the democratic struggle still inspire people all over the world till today. That same media was used, in that way. This was the End SARS of the Arab world, during that period. They turned this social media into, I don't know how good your French is, or if you haven't, social meurtre.
C'est mal.
Social
my
meurtre
French is not good.
is what the social media has become in the hands of Nigerian youth. And it's not just me saying it. Study the statistics of, those who actually written theses, written essays about which nation is considered and is pronounced as being the greatest abusers of the social media. It's Nigeria. Nigeria, and I think India also came among the top list. And then one other country in Africa, whose name I've forgotten now, I think it's Central Africa, somewhere, and those who really turned that. Of course, Donald Trump is in a class of his own. Remember, that's why they knocked him out. The owners of, I think, Facebook or whatever, closed this account and so on, because he told so many lies, incited, used incited language. And for once, this, I agreed with the curtailment of his freedom of speech, because he was not preaching freedom. He was preaching enslavement. He was preaching violence, and he was being racist without mind. Well, the equivalent is what this same generation is doing in Nigeria.
Prof, do you think it's a generational issue, or it's more about the access? So, for example, during your time when you were younger, if you and your peers had access to this same form of communication, you believe that you wouldn't have behaved in the same way the Nigerian youth of today?
No, there'll be, we've mentioned, well, I don't know whether I stopped to mention exceptions, but those exceptions have been drowned. They've been drowned by the sheer weight of negativism, going on. I can name, if you name, one is late, he died in an crash in Ethiopia. You might remember him as one of those who gave dignity and purpose to social media. And there are some youths like that. I did an interview with one young man who's based in London, runs his own blog. An interview with him. A very marvelous discussion. But of course, things were taken out of that, out of context. Yeah. By the time it appeared on social media, I wondered, who are they talking about? What are they talking about? So in every situation, you always have the exceptions. And there's no way I would have been on the side of the abusers of this media. After all, social media is just a development of the printed media. And you can go through the printed media and see how I contributed all the way from my, early youth till today.
Yeah. There's nothing new under the sun, I guess. It's still communication, just a different way. I'm going to pivot the conversation slightly. I'm thinking back to an event that I read about in this book again. Let me open it up so that I can ensure I am quoting properly. Back in your earlier days of, I wouldn't call this activism, maybe more advocacy. It was quite a sad one though. This is 1985 when yourself, Chinua Achebe and J.P. Clark went to see Babangida at the time to sort of try and reason with him for the life of Major General Vatsa, who was a fellow writer with the three of you. There's a picture of it here.
Yeah, famous, the trial.
Yes, the elder statesman of Nigerian literature, as the three of you are referred to. Of course, you're the last elder statesman left. How does that feel?
We're many now.
You say?
Quite a few of us around.
But of the three of you, it's just...
The three of us were elder statesmen of Nigerian and African literature. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Mazizi Kunene to the south, Sao, the Madame Sao, the late Florent Wapa, the elder statesmen and women. There's a certain stage when I think people have arrived. We didn't call ourselves that, by the way.
Of course.
But I accept it. I say, I'm in good company. Yeah. So
now that some of the others that you mentioned are gone and it's just yourself, how does that feel?
It doesn't feel good at all. Doesn't feel. I look, and it's like something has happened which recalls JP. And I look to my left, he's not there. I look to my right, he's not there. He's gone. Chinua, of course, left before everybody else. And no, it's not a good. I just don't want anybody else to, the few of us who are left, they should please try and hang on as best as they can. Stop leaving me by myself. What's all that about? No, I miss them very often.
I can imagine. But I suppose at this age, there's a lot of reflection on the life that you've lived. It's been one of both art and also activism. And I think that we could say the two go hand in hand, but that's a conversation for another day. I'm curious to know, Prof, which do you think has had a greater impact on the world? Has it been your pen or has it been your protest?
On the world?
On the world.
How do I know? I have no idea. It's others who will make up their minds about that. However, there is, your question triggers up, there's another angle to your question, which I feel more comfortable with. Let me use that.
Of course, sir.
Let me narrate an episode. Where the work of art, the writing, becomes inevitable from the activism. I think that when there's this kind of symbiosis between the two, and of such a nature, such a level that it makes it difficult to decide. You sort of feel one wouldn't have existed without the other.
Yes.
Let me give you a very pertinent example. Remember or maybe you were not here, there was a a student who was lynched. Allegedly, she was supposed to have insulted the Islamic religion.
I remember.
She died a gruesome death at the hands of her fellow students who organized. I was away teaching somewhere at the time when it happened. When I heard about it, and then I said, well, they're handling it. Okay. There were protests, there were statements, and it wasn't the first time such a thing had happened, by the way. Only this was really, appalling in the sense that it took place in broad daylight, witnessed by so many people. Films were taken, video shots were made, photographs, stills. The police were there. She was literally snatched from the hands of the police. And I did something, yes, because I was to deliver a lecture in Abuja. A lecture is commemorating in memory of Flight Lieutenant Atahiru, who died in a crash just shortly after that. And I was not going to, I wanted to ignore it, to boycott it, because I felt there was not enough protest. Yes, there was some, and not enough protest, and not enough action by the government had been taken. I mean, the criminals, these killers, were identified. Then, when he was charged to court, I think about 30 SANs rose in Sokoto, volunteering to defend one of the two accused. So I decided I would make more impact by not boycotting that opportunity. I should go use that occasion to make a statement, a very strong statement on the killing of this, which I did. Again, in fairness to some of the leaders, Muslim leaders, they came, including Mrs. El-Rufai, came to see me to assure me all Muslims were not like that. I said, I know, you don't have to tell me. I know you, I know him, I know that one, and so I know. But the state failed that girl. Not only failed, they became complicitous. The dragging out and technicalities, the process, prosecutor not turning. It was like, in the end, when you made an aggregation of the response in relation to the weight of this criminality, it was just awful. So I gave a speech, in that place, in Abuja. Right. Then, however, there was a revenge killing. It took place in Anambra, I think, in which an innocent woman with her two children were kidnapped and killed, clearly as a response. I was supposed to address a secondary school at that time, just around that same time. I canceled that. I felt not much, something. I'd already been in one zone of protest. Said, let me boycott and write them and make a public statement that I also do not believe in revenge killing, taking, exacting quote-unquote justice from innocent people. So that was the act. You can say that was the period of activism. At the same time, however, I just became obsessed, especially when the killer, we talked about social media just now. Here is one instance. This killer went on social media with a box of matches and saying, I set fire to her through this. On social media. This is a youth, a student, a fellow student. So when we're talking about generations and the vileness that some of them, the noisiest of them, are inflicting on society, on human sensibilities, it's just depressing. Right. So with that new provocation, I knew it was not over. So I wrote a play. Or let me put it this way, that a play just forced itself out, more accurately, which I entitled Canticles for a Pyre Foretold. And I made sure, I'm teaching in Abu Dhabi, which is a Muslim country, and I made sure that the play was performed simultaneously here in Ibadan and in Abu Dhabi, where I'm teaching the drama and a course called Faith, Ideology, and Freedom. And for me, this one illustration of it. We did that play. The play has been published. So this is an instance where, for me, the work itself is a form of activism. One cannot just say it's a work of art, that it's just theater, drama. No. Yeah. It's totally, fully enmeshed with that, for me, compelled activism. And we did the plays, and it'll still be redone on occasion. So it's one instance when the two just merge.
I can recall a couple of other instances where there's been that merge. So one is in April 2014 when the Rainbow Book Club was kicking off the Port Harcourt UNESCO World Book Capital, and you gave a keynote speech, and in it you called for the return of the Chibok girls, of course, over about 300 female students that were kidnapped from their school. And I believe until today, 82 of them are still missing or unaccounted for. And then again in 2018, when about 100 girls were kidnapped in Yobe and all were released, except for Leah Sharibu, of course, who refused to denounce her faith. You wrote a collection of poems and you dedicated them to Leah. The following year, you read from that collection at an event that a poetry reading that Providence Bank was putting on, and you just broke down crying. What moved you to tears at that point?
Let me just say that I have a certain, not unique, but maybe unusual relationship with my family, my children. I don't bother them. They are not supposed to bother me, but they know where to find me, anytime, anywhere, any something. And picturing one of my daughters being kidnapped, taken into some forest, disappearing forever. I also happened to have lost a daughter about that time. So it was a combination. It's a combination. And the sense also of impotence, I think, that I'm part of a society in which this happens. That we send our children to school, some hyenas pounce on them, bear them off, and we're unable to do anything. So there's a transposition, and I couldn't continue.
Yeah. And really, that should be the collective response from all of us, right? To feel in that pain, in the horror of what's happening. But on a lighter note, you mentioned your children, who are of course no longer children, but we did have some children who had questions after reading the book and sent them in. So I will just read off a few of them, and we can do a quick question. So we have a question from 13-year-old Love, who is from Benue State, and she asks, why did you keep changing your mind about what you wanted to become?
Oh, dear. Children, it's not the problem. That's the kind of child I was. That's the kind of question I was asking. I'm just fascinated by the phenomenon of humanity, human intelligence, inventiveness, and of course the ability even to spin myths in explication of a world they do not really understand. So if I came across a new phenomenon, I wanted to go there, try that out. Then some were options, or rather propositions by other people who were trying to tell me what I was supposed to become. Because I was so argumentative, always asking very, very, the great questioner. So they would say, yeah, you should be a lawyer. You have to be a lawyer. Oh, look, and then I had an uncle who was a lawyer. His photograph was on the wall. I said, I wouldn't mind trying one of those wigs. Then I also wanted to be a pilot. On the first day I saw a plane, it was like, I want to be up there. Unfortunately, when the recruiting team came, to be a pilot, especially like that, you have to be very good in mathematics, in calculations and calibrations and so on. Me, Uludu, all those subjects. So that was not impossible. But that has not stopped me till today, for instance. It hasn't stopped me wanting to go up in one of those rockets. And I even wrote a mock heroic poem about me after I did my zero gravity thing in San Jose. And I went there, flotation with the million. So I mocked myself with that long poem of Mr. Astronaut, who didn't go beyond but managed to get onto a simulated thing. And I'm still ready, by the way. I try to keep it, so just in case one of these, it's now commercialized, space flight, so
it's never too late.
It's never so, and I use Medium to say to some of them, look, if you need a Nobel laureate in reasonable health, who's willing to go into training and who's capable, I'm here. Don't forget me. And may it happen. Because you can't afford. Who can afford a place in one of those ships? I have to sell this house. I'm not going to do that. But if they agree, I'll come back and write about it, and they can then use it to promote their space business. So I'm ready.
So it sounds like you're still changing your mind about what you want to be.
I can be that one in addition to being a writer. The two things are not contradictory now.
I like that. I like that, love. I hope you're here and you can be many things at the same time. You're not restricted to one. Okay, we have another question from 10-year-old Maya from Canada. Maya wants to know why you're always getting into trouble.
Why I'm always getting into trouble? Tell her she's cheeky. It isn't me who get into trouble. It's people who bring trouble to me.
They're looking for your trouble.
They're looking for my trouble. Thank you very much.
Okay. This is another cheeky question from 10-year-old Mohammed, who's from Kano, and he asks why you were not able to complete your doctorate.
Why I was not able to? I chose not to. I chose not to. I began doing research, and I found that I wanted more to write plays, more meaningful than. And I felt that I'd extracted every analytical harvest I was inclined to from my studies. And I didn't just, when I was doing my degree, I didn't just stay within the curriculum. I read widely. I wasn't studying religion. I studied comparative religion, read widely. History, of course, done when I was here, before I went out on history. Again, I read widely. And I didn't feel that I had anything to contribute by writing a thesis, by completing my thesis. I began the research again. I mean, it's important to mention that. I began the research. And along the way, I just found I would rather write just one play that made meaning, offered different perspectives on the world, than write a doctoral thesis. It was just as simple as that. And I even have a post-BA degree, which you'll never see me use it. Many people don't know I have an MA Cantab, from Cambridge. I don't even use it because I want it clear that I'm not interested. I enjoy writing essays, as you know, and I don't need to get a doctorate to write a meaningful, learned paper. And I've written, I think, as many learned papers as some of those who've done their doctoral thesis.
Probably more.
That's the answer.
Thanks, Prof. And to Mohammed, just because you started something doesn't mean you have to finish it if it's no longer serving you as my takeaway from that. Final question from one of the children is from 11-year-old Amina from Lagos. Amina wants to know what your message is for children who do not like reading.
Who do not like reading?
Yes.
I have to tell you that you are in serious trouble. You're setting traps for yourself in later life if you do not encourage your reading instinct, if you don't bring it out. What you read is also important. We're not talking about just fiction. We're talking about biographies, we're talking about history books, we're talking about sociological works, we're talking about philosophical works, even technology and science. They have their own humanistic responsibilities. You can only master and be aware of those responsibilities by reading. You have to read essays, even if they bore you, you'll find that there's something in there which sticks to the mind, which can be brought to the surface in a situation you had not anticipated. So it's like a storage, which lies on the level of the subconscious, on which you can draw, or which surges in the most unexpected moment. And you ask yourself, oh, where did I read that? Doesn't matter where you read it, but it's already there. It's conscious. I say I was a dullard in mathematics, physics when I was in school, but I read about advances in physical sciences, even in chemical sciences, anything at all which explains or tries to explain the human condition, whether in a creative way or in an analytical way. It's worth reading. Take my word for it. I'm still reading well outside my immediate disciplines.
What I found, because I'm an avid reader as well, what I found is that there are some things that no matter how much you read, perhaps you can't learn or you can't understand until you experience them. And I think that love, relationships are one of those things. And so I guess from everything that you've experienced during your life, what would you say you've learned from life about those topics that you couldn't get in books, that we can't find in books?
That you can't find in a book? I don't know of any culture, book, science book, mathematics applied or pure mathematics. You need the book. Religion. In fact, too many books for religion get many weak-minded people confused. They do things which even the books they read, order them not to do. I can't think of anything. Space travel, of course. Weather, ecology, agriculture. I don't know anything that you cannot find in a book. Even spirituality, which is not material, in which you cannot say, oh, this is an example of what we know as spirituality. Because I'm not talking about church or mosque or shrine or whatever. No. Even spirituality, as nebulous as it is, there are books on spirituality. If you're seeking a path, if you're somebody who's very deeply spiritual, but you really want to dig behind it to see what is the truth, you have to go through books. You can go to all the various places of worship as you like. No, it won't be sufficient. You have to sit down, you and that book, one-on-one. And that's one of the deepest processes of learning.
So you've said that everything can be learned from books, and most of your life experiences you have, like you said, sort of exposed or released into the world through your books. But again, last year in your interview with CNN African Voices, you said that you would like to go on a vacation. It was one of your bucket list items. That was last year, so I need to know, have you been on that vacation since then?
No. You're talking about vacation now?
Yes, sir.
Well, I steal time. And at the end of, let us say, if I've managed to extract a few hours, I persuade myself that I've been on vacation. You see, I've been on vacation the last few hours. And once or twice, I've actually managed to extract even a full day, in which I've sat doing, that happens. A full day, I say, all right, I'm going on strike. So by the time I've added my striking days together, I think they
add up to a vacation.
Reasonable vacation.
Okay.
Let's I've never been good in arithmetic, but when I add it up, I think it comes up to a vacation. But I will send you pictures one of these days of the real vacation.
Oh, I look
in other
forward
words, to be a real tourist. Putting your feet up by the beach, wearing a straw hat, sipping a drink. I wouldn't say sunbathing because I don't need anything, but just to be able to do that for a couple of days. I'll have photographers and I'll send you pictures.
Thanks, I'll be on the lookout for them. Do you have any idea where you would like to go for this, your real vacation?
It should happen. It's happened so often, but something always happened to distort it. I may do it this year, now that I'm being provoked by you, just to be able to tell all of you. Because people laugh at me when I say it. Even wrote me, one wrote me, it's one of my proteges. He said, that'll be the day. He said, ha ha ha, use those emoticons, which you use, several laughing emoticons. To me, cheeky. All right, we'll see.
Well, we'll hold you to it here, and we'll be waiting for those pictures that you promised.
All right.
I think on a final note, sir, like you said, you've given so many interviews and things go this way, that way, get spread out there. I'd like to give you the opportunity, if you were sitting in the interviewer's shoes, what question would you like to be asked?
When are you going to retire, truthfully? Yeah, that's a question.
Okay, Prof, when are you going to retire, truthfully?
Any moment from now.
Okay, we'll hold you to your word on that as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor Soyinka. It has been an absolute pleasure and an honor, and just want to reiterate, thanks for all your support to the Rainbow Book Club over the years. Like I said, I'll be in touch for those vacation photos.
Okay, all right. You're welcome.
Thank you.